Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another episode of the Raw Prospect Podcast. We are live for episode 192 in Week 5 NFL Raw Rundown, going through our three teams that showed up in a big way in Week 5 and three teams that came up small. Um, this is a series that we've been doing every week. If you're new here, make sure to like, subscribe to our channel, leave a 5-star rating and review on our all podcast platforms, wherever you may be listening. And joining me from Houston, Texas, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Ween. How you doing?
Welcome in, Raw Prospect Podcast family and my fellow Baltimore Ravens fans. It is a fun Monday evening here in Houston, Texas, live right at about 10 p.m. With my good co-host, Imy Nixon. We already have a viewer, so if you are into our conversation or you just want to make a comment about our podcast or sports in general, please leave that in the chat, and we will get to that when we can. Enjoy the show, too. Lots to talk about today. We got our three teams that trucked and three teams that sucked, plus some other notes along the way where we get sidetracked, as we do once or twice an episode occasionally. And before all that, though, we have to stay consistent with this, with our prospect of the week. It's officially our Raw prospect of the week. And just to let everyone know, I did not do any prep for this episode. So I am giving my raw reactions from what I saw with my own eyes on television. I still have some stats that I can pull very quickly, but this will be mostly my feelings and my thoughts from what I watched yesterday, as I watched a ton of NFL yesterday. Do you want me to start with my raw prospect, or would you like to go first?
You can go ahead and go first, but I just do want to say before we get into this thing, man, what a week in sports. I mean, I turned on Major League Baseball. I was flipping between that and the football, and then we also had the WNBA Finals, and I watched that game back after it had already finished. That was an entertaining basketball game. It's been a crazy week in sports. We have just about everything going and getting started right now. Even hockey, if you're into that too.
Yeah, and maybe down the road we can get a little bit into hockey, because I have actually watched the playoffs, and it's kind of actually entertaining. I don't know how it goes with like mainstream stuff like this on podcasts when we don't really know a whole, or at least I don't know a lick about hockey, but I could at least start to learn. So maybe that's something down the road in the future. Maybe towards the end of the season, playoff time, we can maybe talk a little bit about that. Yeah, it was a crazy weekend in sports. The Braves pretty much, I think, possibly saved their season tonight, because I do not believe they would have gone back to Philly and gotten both games, which they would have needed to if they lost tonight. And man, credit to Austin Riley for possibly their biggest hit of the season, one of the more underrated infielders in Major League Baseball. And then the last thing I want to say before I get to my prospect of the week is I did watch my first actual bit of live NBA preseason tonight, and I got aroused by Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama. So with what I watched in that first half, man, the NBA is in good hands. Okay. I don't want to be a homer on my prospect of the week, but I kind of am. And it's not the jersey that I'm wearing. It's not number 90. It's not 56, who basically made one of the winning plays yesterday with that strip sack on Baltimore's second to last drive. It's not George Pickens, who had a huge day, continues to own Marlon Humphrey. And it's not Kenny Pickett, who came up big again in a late drive against Baltimore, which he did last year. It's not really anyone. It's not any of the household names that you think of if you're not a Steelers fan when you think of the Steelers. It's actually going to be Jaylen Warren. I think he's the perfect personification of what this segment should be about. Made some huge plays yesterday. Now, when you look at the numbers, it's not going to blow you away. Had 40 yards on 9 carries. That's a 4.5 average. Still better than Najee, but I'm not here to have the Jaylen Warren versus Najee argument. I'm here to acknowledge the value, I think, of Jaylen Warren to this team. A 4.5 yards per carry average. Better than what you usually get from the Steelers running game on a consistent basis. The big thing here is 3 receptions for 39 yards. That's a 13-yard per reception average. So we ended up with 12 touches for 79 yards, a 6.5 yard per play average on the day against the Baltimore defense. He's just undrafted out of Oklahoma State, came on late last year. Impressive ability. If you watch him, impressive ability. Maybe not his most impressive trait. I'll talk about that here in a second, but has impressive ability in space as a receiver. Once he catches the ball, he can kind of make something out of nothing, which I think sometimes Najee struggles to do. He gets upfield quickly. I think he's got good vision in the backfield. But for a guy who's fairly small, I mean, he's not a big back, but he can pack a punch. If you watch him in pass protection, there are a lot of times he will save not only Kenny Pickett's ass, but the Steelers' offensive line's ass when they're about to get number 8 killed. He steps up. He blocks linebackers. He'll pick up the blitz. He's done it multiple times this season to give Kenny a little extra time. He runs hard. He plays hard. He plays kind of like how you would think an undrafted player would play. And again, I'm not here to have the Jaylen Warren, Najee Harris argument that many Steelers fans will want to have right now. But certainly, I don't think the Steelers would be where they are, especially in yesterday's game, without the services of number 30 in black and gold.
Yeah. He's been a back that I've had my eye on for a while. I think, as you mentioned, I think his greatest trait in terms of running between the tackles is his contact balance. I think
Yes.
breaking tackles and just being slippery, that's just a really and it looks like I was muted. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay.
You went out for a second, so just repeat the last part of what you said.
Yeah. He just provides a completely different element than what Najee Harris provides. I think at times with the offensive line struggles, Najee Harris hasn't been able to get downhill, and I think Jaylen Warren is better suited to overcome that. He has a little bit better of a jump cut. He's a little bit more shifty and can make a cut and find holes laterally a little bit better than Najee can. So I still think they're a good 1-2 punch, but I'd like to see a little bit more of him moving forward, I think.
Absolutely. Who's your prospect of the week?
My prospect of the week is a player that impressed, had a amazing 2-minute, game-winning drive to close the game out. It was Desmond Ridder, and we were both, very critical of him last week against the Jaguars in that game in London, where he lost the game for them, if we're being entirely honest. But I'll be the first to admit I did not see this performance coming. He was very efficient, and he looked a lot more comfortable. He was seeing the field a lot better. I would have liked for them to, call play action with Bijan a little bit more, but that offense seemed to be a little bit more competent, and they were able to throw the ball well this week, even without the run game getting completely going. So, good win for the Falcons against a Texans team that's better than we all would have thought before the season started. That's a good win against a good Texans team.
Yeah, it's a well-coached Texans team with a rookie quarterback that looks really, really good. And it was a week full of questions about Desmond Ridder and his job security at that quarterback position for Atlanta. But he comes out, was clutch at the end of the game. But you look at his numbers over the course of the entirety of the game, 28 of 37. So as you mentioned, he was efficient. 330 yards passing and a touchdown while rushing for another touchdown. Um, he completed his second fourth quarter comeback this year, and it was his first game over 250 yards. And in his first game over 250 yards, he actually went over 300 yards. And he actually got the ball to Kyle Pitts this week.
Yeah.
Thank you. Even though I lost my fantasy again.
And Drake London. Both of them got involved. They got to get the ball to those playmakers.
Okay. You want to start with teams that sucked or teams that were good?
I'd say the teams that sucked are more on my mind at the moment. As a Cowboys fan, I think this rant was probably to be expected. If you're aware of my fandom on this podcast, I'm a Cowboys fan. I'm not the typical like, oh, we're gonna win the Super Bowl or yada yada yada. I mean, I was never on that train, but I'm not gonna lie. After that Patriots game, I did, start to think, okay, maybe this team is for real this year. But man, it just felt like all of the changes we made us match up even worse against the 49ers even. As we all know, they moved to the Texas Coast offense, as Mike McCarthy calls it. Very like short passing game, getting the ball out quickly. And in theory, that works very well. But with the 49ers defense that just loves to attack you in the middle of the field and jump those short routes, especially if you're not going to show that you can or even attempt to have a threat downfield outside of the numbers, then they're just going to jump all of those routes. And we saw that last night. 3 interceptions from Dak and just a really poor performance from the offense. I think the defense held their own the first half. I'm not going to put this loss on them. They did what they could. They forced a turnover. They were trying to give this offense chances, but they were just on the field the entire game. So just, a game that we all know the Cowboys had marked on their calendar and came out and disappointed.
I'm not going to dog on your Cowboys because, quite frankly, I mean, we can talk about. I certainly didn't think it was a good performance by any stretch of the imagination by Dallas, but at the same time, I think San Francisco is on a different level right now.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll talk about them when we get into our teams that were good. I saw that as more San Francisco just being on another level. Now we'll see what happens with Dallas the next couple of weeks. Who do they play next? Not to put you on the spot.
I'm not entirely sure, actually. I'll have to look.
Okay. Maybe we'll talk about the 49ers later, but I just saw that as very good, very elite play of the San Francisco 49ers. And the last thing I needed was actually George Kittle to do what he did, which is score his first 3 touchdown game. And he did. And it's the same thing Davante Adams did a couple weeks ago when I was on the verge of a win, but then Davante Adams went for 40-some points against Pittsburgh, even though the Steelers won that game. So I wasn't totally lost for it, I guess, if you will. Okay, my first thing that sucked this weekend, it's kind of more specific, more so than it is about team. And I don't know what it was about Baltimore yesterday, but their offense, in particular, their second half offense against Pittsburgh. But overall, most of that game, when they had opportunities, they didn't capitalize. The receivers were awful. 8 dropped passes. I don't know what was going on with that. 3 drop touchdowns, clear drop touchdowns. 2 fumbles. One basically put the game away with the strip sack by Highsmith and the pickup by TJ Watt. Ended up extending the lead to 7. The illegal formation or whatever that basically disallowed the Steelers to run out the clock. I mean, that just wasn't a smart play on Pittsburgh's part, or a smart thing to do on Pittsburgh's part, not a well-coached sequence there. But 2 fumbles, and then the Gunnar Olszewski fumble on the kick return when I believe it was, or the punt return when Baltimore was punting with, I think it was 5:40 left to go in the game. Pittsburgh was down 10-8. Olszewski returns the ball. He gets it knocked out by, I think, a combination of one of the Steelers that was knocked into him and the Raven knocked out the ball. The Ravens recovered it. They returned it inside the 5. And on that third down, Lamar tries to throw a back shoulder fade to Odell, and he leaves it inside, and it's intercepted by Joey Porter Jr. And that's the only thing you cannot do in that situation. You had the perfect opportunity to at least extend the lead to 5. The worst you can do out of that situation is a field goal. And he didn't make a good throw. I don't think it was a good play call in that situation. I mean, I get what you're trying to do, but that's the one thing they couldn't do. They did. That led to the Steelers' touchdown on the following drive with Pickens. It was just, I thought, not to bag on the Ravens or anything. I mean, they easily should have won that game yesterday. I thought their offense was actually pretty damn good in the first half, although they came away in that first half after almost 300 yards of offense with only 10 points, which was kind of disappointing in my opinion. So I don't know. It's just I think it's one of those days where it was just a day of missed opportunities, drop passes, costly mistakes, and you let a Mike Tomlin coach team with a good defense and a knack for playing very well as an underdog to feed off mistakes at home after a week where they got absolutely humiliated in Houston and they needed a victory. You let them hang around too long, and that's what happens. And then once the Steelers go up, that pass rush can tee off because they know Baltimore's out of timeouts. They have to throw, and TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith finished the deal.
Yeah, it was a weird game to watch. I'm not gonna lie. From my perspective, it just felt like on that back shoulder fade they were trying to throw to Odell. Number one, I don't think that's the matchup you want to work right there. I understand you may want to attack the rookie, maybe a little bit of inexperience, but I don't know if at this point in Odell's career he's in an athletic spot to have the confidence in him to go get that football, even if it was a good throw. And number two, it was just bad by Lamar. At that point, you just put it on the front pylon and you take that out of the equation because it was inexcusable as you mentioned. The Ravens, I thought this was a game they just let slip away, and that's just not the type of football you need to play against the Steelers because the Steelers, as you know all too well, if you let them hang around, they're probably one of the best teams in the league at winning games when they're the underdog and they're overlooked because they just have dudes that make plays. They're just playmakers. TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith. I mean, George Pickens at the end of that game. I mean, say what you want about them, they just get it done.
Yeah,
My second team.
one more comment.
Okay, yeah.
One more comment. And it's not a great feeling. You had a chance. You had a legitimate chance if you're Baltimore to come out of this game 4-1. I think 2 games ahead of everybody, at least in your division, or at least 1.5 games above everyone else in the division. If they had held on to win this game and just say they just, I don't know, kick the field goal or they don't drop one of those touchdowns, they win this game. They come out 4-1. They're on top of their division. They look like the clear team to beat in the division going to London, but instead you make a little too many mistakes, and you're headed to London. You're on a flight to London today to go play the Tennessee Titans, and you know it's not a great feeling. It's just not a great feeling, and all of a sudden you're trailing Pittsburgh in the division. If they had won that game yesterday, this is the last thing I'll say. They would have been 3-0 in the AFC North, and all 3 wins would have been on the road. They would have swept the road slate in division, which is hard to do in just a year in general, but they would have done it in the first 5 weeks of the season and put themselves in the the driver's seat, if you will. So I don't know. I still think the Ravens are the best team in the division right now. The best team doesn't always win in the NFL, but it doesn't feel good right now if you're Baltimore.
Yeah, and it just feels like the top of that division is cannibalizing itself a little bit, and here come the Bengals. We'll get to them a little bit later, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
it's definitely that loss was definitely, if you're a Bengals fan, that's the result that you were cheering for. Okay, for my next team that sucked.
I'm guessing we have to have one of the same teams, right?
Yeah, not to bag on the Patriots 2 weeks in a row here, but they are in the title for a reason. 34-0 against a Saints team that offensively hasn't been good this year. Man, I mean, it doesn't get much worse than that. It really doesn't. I just think we got to have a conversation about what the future of Bill Belichick is here. I don't. I think realistically, maybe you let him draft another quarterback and get another 3-year run at this thing, see if he can rebuild this thing, turn this thing around. But right now, it just looks awful.
Yeah, it's pretty bleak in Foxborough right now. They actually looked like a good football team the first couple of weeks, even though they lost a couple of games.
Yeah.
They hung tough with the Eagles. They hung tough with the Dolphins. Two of, I think, the top 5-6 teams in the league, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, there are rumors abound about Mac Jones and his poor leadership and his poor attitude and not wanting to be coached hard and so forth and so forth. The scouts today, boy, they went scorched earth. Anonymous scouts from around the league went scorched earth on the Patriots, saying their O-line's bad. Mac Jones, I mean, isn't an NFL starter. They have no skill position talent. They don't know how to draft. I mean, it was right or not. I mean, they went scorched earth.
Yeah.
It's just
20
not.
years to say that.
It's not good. The offense has been shut out from the end zone 2 weeks in a row. I don't know. It doesn't look good. Turnovers that turn into points for the opposition at the worst times. Mac Jones severely struggling. We knew he had a ceiling, but it seems like he's starting to regress. Um, and it's hard to win like that. When you put so much stress on your defense with your inability to do stuff offensively, especially when your defense is down a key man or two with Christian Gonzalez out with the torn labrum and Matt Judon out, I think, indefinitely with his injury. It's tough. I don't know. I mean, I'm not plugged into the Patriots, so I don't know how much of this falls on Belichick, how much should fall on Mac Jones and everybody else. The blame will be spread around, but man, it doesn't look good. And if Aaron Rodgers comes back next year, and we'll see what he looks like. But you have Tua with Mike McDaniels, you have Josh Allen with you know their elite talent. Although I'm not a huge fan of Sean McDermott, but he's a very good NFL coach. Um, and you have even a guy like Aaron Rodgers, or maybe even a Zach Wilson. Who knows what the Jets do at this point? But I think at this point, if it doesn't get any better very, very soon, you have to think about drafting a quarterback, especially with the fact that this is possibly the best quarterback class that you're going to see for a long time.
The last thing I want to say about the Patriots is, like, I can't help but get the feeling, like, I can't shake the feeling that this is a team Tom Brady would probably win with. It just has that feel to it. It's not like they're devoid of talent. Um, their skill position talent is not elite, but when has it been elite? Really? I mean, you have two solid tight ends, Hunter Henry, Mike Gesicki. I mean, a couple decent receivers, Kendrick Bourne and Devontae Parker. I don't know, man. The defense. I mean, they've been destroyed by injuries, but for the most part, they've been solid. I just can't help but get that feeling. The one thing I'll say about Mac Jones is I don't know what to make of, the leadership rumors. I'm not in the locker room, so I can't make any claims when it comes to that. But one thing I will say is his body language looks terrible when things go wrong there. Like usually you're either, the rah-rah guy, you're super vocal and like fired up, or you're just, you know, more quiet and lead by example. He's kind of it kind of just looks like he's doing neither somehow. I don't. He
It
just
kind of has
it's very strange.
it kind of has just kind of like a Jay Cutler-ish feel to it. I don't
Yeah,
know if that's an unnecessary stray at Jay Cutler, but I don't
just
know.
looks pathetic.
Yeah. Um, I don't know, man. We can. There's much time to talk about the Patriots. That was my second team as well. I mean, I don't know how it's not. If you get shut out at home, was that game at home? I believe it was.
Yeah, I think it was.
Um, you know, a lot of times in the NFL, not always, but a lot of times in the NFL, when you get blown out, you expect, especially a well coached team like the Patriots, to come back and not absolutely lay an egg and an even worse performance the next week, arguably, but they did that. So I don't know, man. How about you go first with your third team? Because I got to think about mine. You go first with your third team.
My third team is the New York Giants. I thought about the Commanders here. I thought about a couple other teams, but oh man, where to even start? Daniel Jones looks broken, man. Um, I don't I don't really know if it's his fault. It's not really, to be honest. The offensive line is just playing horribly, and it doesn't help when your All Pro left tackle has been injured. But my goodness, it kind of just feels like the Giants' offense last year was a little bit gimmicky, a lot of bootlegs, a lot of short passes, and with the off season of studying their film and getting a read on what they do, the entire NFL is just calling their bluff this year. And now that they've kind of had a couple of bad weeks here, Daniel Jones is out there seeing ghosts. Um, that's what it looks like to me. He's not seeing the field well. It's almost like he's looking at the rush. And once you get to that point, I mean, it's hard to come back from that.
Yeah. I'll just piggyback on what you said because it helps the flow of conversation. Um, well, they got to go into Buffalo on Sunday night this week, which isn't going to help things, especially after a disappointing loss by the Bills in London yesterday. That's not going to help things for a 1-4 team that's really struggling right now, especially on the offensive line, without a couple key players in key positions. Andrew Thomas, the left tackle, your star running back, Saquon Barkley. Um, Daniel Jones now is having to deal with the uncertainty of a neck injury. And I mean, you can't really blame him at this point, how many times he's been hit. I kind of feel bad for him in a way. Um, it could be still a couple more weeks before they're able to get Andrew Thomas back. They're able to get Saquon Barkley back. So they can get their offense to at least be somewhat functional because I do think Saquon makes a difference. And I definitely think Andrew Thomas makes a difference over what they have starting out there right now. But when you're sacked 7 times, you thank God for the Patriots that they weren't the only team not to score a touchdown for the second straight game because the Giants offense did not score a touchdown for the second straight game. I guess if you want to maybe take something away positively for New York, it's that your defense was your best offense. They gave up some big plays, but everyone gives up some big plays to the Miami Dolphins. Uh, um, but they forced 3 turnovers. Jason Pinnock had a 102-yard pick six. So I don't think everything is, their defense isn't playing absolutely terrible. But yeah, Daniel Jones just looks like, I mean, the close-ups when you see him at the line of scrimmage, he kind of looks like deer in the headlights. Like, oh my! Like in that game against San Francisco, I know it feels so long ago now. Last Thursday night, it was just like, my goodness, they were almost helpless. So it's rough for the Giants right now. I certainly didn't expect this 1-4 after what we saw last year, but I don't know, man. It just seems like things have to change quickly, or it could get really ugly.
Yeah. We'll see what the future holds for the Giants. I do think they still have the right coach, but
I do too.
it looks like we might see another rebuild here for them. So we'll see. Did you want to touch on the Commanders as kind of a honorable mention team?
Yeah. What are your thoughts on the Commanders?
I just look at that defense and I just man for a coach that's called Riverboat Ron. A lot of people have been pointing out the conservative decision making he's been having with the lack of fourth down attempts and the kicking a field goal late there. But I mean, even further than that, you look at their defensive scheme, um, rarely blitzing, giving up the short passes with that, you know, cover four with the, deep shell. I just, I've said this so much on this podcast. It's kind of like I'm beating a dead horse here, but I just don't like that defensive scheme. I think that scheme is going to die out here pretty soon because quarterbacks are just too good for you to just let them take 8-yard throws, 10-yard throws every single time. And not to mention the bind that it puts your defense in terms of stopping the run as well. We've seen so many defenses calling this cover four shell get gashed in the run game because of it. It's just, I would like to see this Washington defense attack a little bit more. Like, we saw a little bit more in the second half. Once they started blitzing a little bit more, once they started making an impact with that front four and just playing a little bit more aggressively, it felt like things were starting to flip. And then obviously the missed field goal happens and the momentum was lost again. But that defense has way too much talent to just be playing like that.
Yeah, it hasn't been good. Their defense ranks 25th in points allowed. They're actually middle of the pack in yards given up, but after last year, finishing 7th and 3rd respectively, it hasn't been good. They've given up. Well, they gave up 5 plays of 25 or more yards on Thursday night to a struggling Bears offense. And they've actually given up an NFL high 16 such plays of 25 or more yards this year. I do think Chase Young has come on the past couple weeks. The defense in general has struggled, but he had a season high 36.4% pass rush win rate against a bad Bears offensive line, albeit, but take what you can get. And he has 3 sacks in the past 4 games. So he's making his presence felt a little bit. But the secondary, their attention to detail has been poor. I don't want to pile on a rookie. I believe he's a rookie, Emmanuel Forbes.
Yeah.
It seems like he could be going through some things off the field. You just never know with that stuff, based on some of the sideline shots that we've seen with him sitting on the bench. But he's obviously struggled mightily. You don't put the blame on a rookie, though. The entire unit has failed to produce big plays. Only 1 takeaway in the past 3 games. You're right. I mean, they got to attack more. They got to be more aggressive. This defense has to play better because you have a quarterback that's, I think, it's up and down with Sam Howell, but he's had 2 fairly productive games in a row. He's thrown for almost 700 yards the past 2 weeks, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception. I don't know. It's a weird situation in Washington. It's been a weird situation there with Ron Rivera. I don't know what the expectations should be for the Commanders this year, but that could get interesting if this really goes south.
Yeah. And it feels like they're just kind of stuck in purgatory here. I think with the new ownership there officially this year, expect this team to make some pretty big changes this offseason. Also, I think they're going to make some splash moves here as well.
Yeah, be aggressive if you're Washington. I actually like some of the pieces that you have on offense. I like a couple of the backs that they have. I love Terry McLaurin. I like a couple of other of their. I like the tight end.
Logan Thomas.
Logan Thomas. I like some of their receivers. I like some of the pieces that they have. I like a lot of the pieces they have on that defensive front. They're still figuring things out in the secondary, but it's not like it's not like you have a terrible roster. You just got to start playing better. I don't know if it's coaching, attention to detail, preparation, whatever it might be. I agree. If you're Washington, take a big swing this offseason, whether that's in the draft or free agency, and I do think with the new ownership, they'll find a way to do something, because the worst thing I think you can do right now in today's NFL is be in that middle tier where you're just stuck in 7, 8, 9 win seasons, where you can't really get high draft position, and you're kind of doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome.
Yeah.
It's just not working for you.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to better conversations here. Actually, not better conversations, but more fun teams to talk about. 3 teams that trucked. I want to start by we've crushed them a couple times, but I want to start by giving our fair share of credit to the Chicago Bears. I think we should. Round of applause for everything that they've dealt with the past month, from the, what is it, the defensive coordinator situation to drama with Justin Fields at the podium to just the awful football that we saw the first couple weeks of the season. They actually have kind of looked like a pretty good offense the past 2 weeks. Now, they gave that game away last week against Denver. But, I mean, credit to DJ Moore. Had arguably his best, I think it'd be his best game as a pro. I mean,
I would
230
say so.
yards,
Yeah.
230 yards, 3 touchdowns, 141 of those after the catch. Justin Fields, I think in his last 2 games, has 8 touchdowns to 1 interception, and had, I believe, he has a perfect pass, almost a perfect passer rating this year when he targets DJ Moore. I think Tevin Jenkins, their draft pick from, I believe, not this past year, but the year before, he was activated off the injured reserve hours before that game, and he actually played really, really well and helped that Bears offensive line in a way against a strong Washington defensive front. He was playing on kind of a snap count, but in the plays that he was in there, I thought he was pretty good. I thought they ran the ball extremely well. I do like the Bears' backs. Love Khalil Herbert. I really like Roschon, obviously. I thought it was their defensive front got after it for, I think, the first time this year. They got Sam Howell a couple times, although that Washington offensive line is not very good in its own right. But I thought it was just a good, solid win for a team that really needed it, for just the overall morale of the team, and good for Matt Eberflus as well. Look, I've always been a Justin Fields fan. I hope it can somehow things can turn around, and maybe this is the start of it. We'll have to see where this goes, but it's at least good to see a couple good offensive performances back-to-back weeks for a team that was almost out of hope just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I think, you can say what you want about, how open guys are, but you got to execute in the NFL. There's no
Yeah,
plays that are or wins that are given to you. So Fields has his best NFL game as a passer, I think, this past week, and you got to give credit where it's due. And I think, for me personally, it was good to just see him throw the ball with confidence, just let it rip. I To me, when I look at evaluating a young quarterback, I would rather see them just let it rip into tight windows than hold on to the ball and kind of play tentative. I think trusting his arm, he has amazing arm talent. I think
absolutely.
it's clear to see whenever he just lets that ball rip. And I got to give him credit also. His mechanics look better also. It just
Yep.
hasn't shown up because he hasn't trusted his eyes. Now we can finally see these next few weeks. Okay, just continue to make these steps forward, and the schedule opens up for them these next few weeks. There's not a lot of, there's winnable games on the schedule here, and we could be looking back at September and being like, I mean, that may have just been a blip on the radar.
Yeah, I would have never thought I'd
Yeah,
say it
I would
3
have never
weeks ago,
thought it either. They still
but
got to go do it though.
I'm actually kind of interested to see where this can carry them here the next 2-3 weeks. Now, if it If it goes south again, this conversation is sort of a moot point. But I think they have some momentum. They're feeling good after a good team win. I mean, that was a team win. They go on the road, into that environment. They put a 40 burger on what's usually a pretty good defense. Struggling right now, but they took advantage of it. Give them credit. I thought Fields played like he's kind of talked about. He just played football. He took what the defense gave him. He made plays. He made some plays with his feet as well. I thought he played pretty loose and used his talent. He's got a good arm. He's got all the tools. He just hasn't trusted up here. I think it's all up here with him. There were some mechanical issues he had to get worked out, but that looks better. I think 60-70% of it is mental with him, and maybe I hope that things can keep going in a positive direction. Okay, your first team that you wanted to highlight, or were the Bears one of your teams?
Yeah, the Bears were one of my teams also, but I got to shout out the Jacksonville Jaguars, playing a red hot Bills team in London, and just went out there and kicked their butt a little bit in that first half. It kind of just felt like the Bills were kind of reeling there in that first quarter. They got hit in the mouth a little bit. They were running the football on them a little bit. Travis Etienne had a amazing game to his credit. He looks explosive. And we knew this team had the talent. We knew that the offense would come around at one point or another. But that is a really good Bills team that they beat. The Bills had some injuries, had some really unfortunate injuries in this game. But nonetheless, got to give the Jags credit. Really good game from Trevor Lawrence. Calvin Ridley seemed to be back where he should be playing like he did in week one. And I don't know. We've said all this stuff about, the Jaguars are losing games that they should be winning, but here they are leading their division.
Yeah, you're leading your division. I think it's a division that to this point is better than we thought it would be, but you're leading your division. You have now a key victory against another AFC contender. You both have, I think, the same records, and you have that head-to-head victory, which helps later on down the road. It's not perfect by any means, but this isn't teams that are perfect. This is teams that looked good. They completely stopped a freight train right in its tracks on Sunday morning, and they got a very big W. Trevor Lawrence has said, you are measured in this league by what you do against the league's best teams. And they didn't quite get it done back earlier on in the season against the Kansas City Chiefs, although that was a game where they had some miscues in the red zone. It felt like if the end zone was a yard longer or a yard deeper, they maybe would have won that game. Their defense played really well. They had that stinker against the Texans, but the Texans have actually proven to be a very competent team at this very moment with I think a quarterback that has potential to turn into something very, very, very high level. If he's not already there. They beat one of the hottest teams in the NFL. They dominated time of possession. They ran the football very, very well. Travis Etienne had one of his best games as a pro. They dominated yardage, and they continued to get better on third downs. That was an area where they really, really struggled earlier on in the season. They were 10 of 18 on third downs. That's much, much better yesterday. The defense played good enough, although Buffalo started to come back a little bit in that game. But I thought from start to finish, it was a well-played game. by Jacksonville. My only concern right now is that offensive line. Um, it continues to be an issue with them. They can overcome it because of the talent that they have at the quarterback position and the coaching of one Doug Peterson. But 2 penalties by their rookie tackle, Anton Harrison, uh, and Brandon Scherf, a bad snap by their center, a couple whiffs by Cam Robinson that ended up stalling drives, stole points, and resulted in a couple turnovers, a couple fumbles by Trevor Lawrence. The offensive line isn't great right now, but they have a good defense. They have an elite quarterback. They have good weapons. They've proven they can run the football. They're well coached. So yeah, it was a good win for Jacksonville, even though that actually wasn't one of my teams, but definitely deserved to be shouted out. Do you have anything else to add there?
Not really, but one thing I will say is the defensive line played much, much better this week. I think held the Bills running game to, I think it was just over 30 yards for the entire game. Really impressive stuff. They got after it. They got after Josh Allen. I mean, the Jags defense, I think, is a little bit underrated at the moment.
Yeah. 52 minutes in. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're on to my second team that I wanted to highlight in the same division, actually. I know there was an injury to their quarterback once again. It sucks to see that he's hurt again. And you know where I'm going with this. The Indianapolis Colts. I'll be pretty quick on this. I just think the Colts are a very well coached team. Like they are extremely well coached. I think Shane Steichen can call the absolute hell out of a football game. I mean, Anthony Richardson has left the game, I think, twice in the past 3 or 4 weeks, and it seems like that offense doesn't really skip a beat. The offensive line, which was subjected to heavy criticism last year, has bounced back this year. That they have now a surprisingly productive running game with the return of one Jonathan Taylor, which is news we haven't yet mentioned on this show. So that's why I wanted to bring up the Colts. Zach Moss has been excellent for them and probably a fantastic fantasy find if you have him on your fantasy team, as he's had, I think, 2 huge games in the past 2 or 3 weeks. He ran for 165 yards and 2 touchdowns against a solid, at the very least, Tennessee Titans defense, usually, at least on the defensive front. I think Shane Steichen can call a game. It didn't seem like that offense skipped a beat with. I mean, when you can, as an offensive coordinator in today's league, somehow make it look kind of easy offensively to move the ball down the football field with your backup quarterback, in the sudden change in the game with Anthony Richardson leaving, I just think they're a well-coached team. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Um, you hate to lose your rookie quarterback who you're trying to develop here for a couple weeks, I think. But I just think the Colts deserve credit for what they're doing right now, along with the Titans and the Jaguars. They're winning some football games, and I think they got the coach right. We'll see what the quarterback is. I mean, I still want to see more of Anthony Richardson, but there's certainly been some very, very good moments here so far. Their offensive line's playing well. They have a good running game. Shout out to the Colts, man.
Yeah, I think if I were to go out on a limb, I'd say they're going to be right there in terms of winning the division come here late in the season. And I don't think I would have said that before the season started. I think the defense is better than I gave it credit for. The defensive front is better than I gave it credit for. The addition of Sansa Mabukum has been, I think, one of the most underrated signings of the entire offseason. He's been amazing for them. And he's provided some athletic juice that I think they've been missing here the last the last few years, really. Kwity Paye has taken a step forward. I don't know. I know I've been lower on the Colts in the past when they've had expectations to be good, but strangely, I feel better about this team than I've had in years, just because it. Number one, their coach, as you mentioned, I think Shane Steichen is just brilliant, and we saw it last year with how the Eagles' offense functioned. But beyond that, you have a guy in Anthony Richardson who I think has had the opportunity to show off his strengths in this offense, and all of his weaknesses are just being, you know, limited. It feels like some of those late in the down fuck it throws are kind of gone. All of that we saw at Florida, all those little mistakes he would make, it doesn't seem like they're a huge problem anymore.
Yeah, totally agreed with everything you said. We're on to our last teams here. Do we have any chats yet? I don't think so. If you have anything you want to say, voice your opinions in the chat. Who is your third and final team that you wanted to highlight for teams that trucked in week 5?
Um, I wanted to highlight the 49ers. Originally, I had Brock Purdy as my prospect of the week, but I figured we would eventually get to that 49ers conversation anyway, so I went a different direction. But man, I mean, a few weeks ago, I had described Brock Purdy as a great quarterback trapped in a bad quarterback's body, and I don't think that really does it justice. Um, the playmaking ability outside the pocket, the out of structure plays that he adds onto this offense. I mean, you can say all you want about him being a system quarterback, but I don't think there's a long list of guys who can run the offense the way Brock Purdy is right now. With I mean, even with this amount of weapons, I mean, you have, as we said, a Ferrari to drive. You just don't want to crash it into a wall. But still, I mean, you can cross Jimmy Garoppolo off the list. You can cross, I mean, a bunch of guys off the list right off the bat, just that don't have the athleticism and just playmaking ability that Brock Purdy does. I don't know what it is about his out of structure plays, but it just feels like he has a it factor that few guys have in terms of pocket presence. He knows when to escape and when not to. And
Yeah,
that's a trait that is so rare and so underrated because it feels like that's something that's natural. Um, some quarterbacks have it and some don't. Like, for example, Daniel Jones doesn't have it. When there's a guy coming on up to him on his blind side, he doesn't feel the pressure. Brock Purdy does.
yeah, something about him, man. I don't know if it's you know if something clicked at Iowa State, something with his development at Iowa State. I think they did a really good job with him being put into this Niner system. Obviously, has a little bit to do with the amount of success that he's having and winning games and putting up the numbers that he's putting up. But in this point, he's won his first 10 starts in the league. Um, I don't have the stats in front of me, but you know, he just continues to. I mean, he looks like. Would you rank him in the top 10 of NFL quarterbacks right now?
Absolutely. No question.
Yeah. Um, look, he's not. He doesn't. He doesn't meet the eye for what I think you typically. I mean, he's not Trevor Lawrence. He doesn't. He's not Justin Herbert. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not any of these elite quarterbacks, but he drives the bus. He's elite at doing it. He doesn't turn the ball over. Great pocket presence. Niners have won 15 straight games. It's tied for a franchise record. Brock Purdy actually only needs five more wins to have 15 straight wins to start his career as a starter, which would tie number 7 for the Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger, who started his career with 15 consecutive victories, although it wasn't nearly as pretty as what Brock Purdy is doing right now. Yeah, I mean, Kyle Shanahan, just absolutely off the charts brilliant. Their defense, I don't know how you move the ball against that defense. It's like they've got elite playmakers at all 3 levels, at all positions. Fred Warner somehow has gotten better. Dre Greenlaw is like a really goddamn good Batman or Robin to Fred Warner's Batman. We know about that defensive line with Nick Bosa and Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead, whoever else they have on that D line. The safety who kind of looks like Palomalu, but
Kalanoa Hufanga,
yeah, I think Kyle Shanahan absolutely loves that dude, and rightfully so. Boy, oh boy, the 49ers. They're just they're playing the Browns next week, and I don't know if Deshaun Watson's going to play in that game. And if he doesn't, even if he does, man, I don't know what to tell the Browns, man. I respectfully, like literally. I mean, they did it to Pittsburgh, they did it to Dallas. They've done it to pretty much everybody. I don't know. I don't know. You don't want to see the 49ers on your schedule right now. I'll say that much.
yeah. I don't know what to say either. I think that's going to wrap up the show here. I don't. If you have anything further about the 49ers you think we missed on, drop it down below in the chat. But I mean, that team is just ridiculous. Just the speed and just I don't think I can remember offense in terms of talent paired with a defense this good. I can't think of one.
They just traded for another pass rusher and Randy Gregory, and that's just at this point a depth piece for them.
Yeah, I don't know if he's even going to play much.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I mean they're just they're it feels like right now, and this is the way I'll end the show. And I'm not necessarily counting out anybody in the NFC, but it feels like we're on another collision course for Niners Eagles right now. And if it happens again, I can't wait to watch it because those two teams, that's like a heavyweight fight.
Yeah.
I don't even know what you call that fight. Okay, well, anything else? Any parting shots? As we're kind of right around where we usually ended up.
Well, let me just mention the score of Monday Night Football real fast. I think that was a pretty tight game. Last I saw it, it was 17-13 Raiders. I'm assuming it's going to go final here. Yeah, I think the Raiders won 17-13.
Yep, Raiders won 17-13 over the Packers. The Raiders actually picked off Jordan Love just before we started recording. That was the last play I watched, actually, of that game. Good win for the Raiders. I mean, I didn't watch the full game because I was flipping back and forth between baseball and the NBA preseason. But good win for the Raiders to get to 2-3. There's been some drama in that organization once again. What's new with Chandler Jones and his situation, and players on social media calling out Josh McDaniels. It's been kind of wild. There was another wild game in Atlanta tonight with the Braves, as we mentioned at the start of the show, getting a huge win. And right now, top of the ninth, 4-2 Diamondbacks over Dodgers. The Diamondbacks are on the brink of stealing the first two games in Los Angeles and going back to the desert with a 2-0 lead. The Snakes, man. The Snakes. Okay, well, I'm going to go watch the end of that game. Until then, though, make sure you watch out for Dit Hole. We know the Longhorns are on a bye this week, but there's still a lot to talk about with regards to Texas, Oklahoma, and the rest of college football as we get Oregon and Washington this week in a huge, huge game. We're going to start college basketball stuff as well. And Imy and I have a pretty fun NBA episode planned for you guys this week. That will likely take place on Wednesday at this moment.
Yep.
So keep an eye out for that. But until then, I guess you do it this time.
Oh gosh. Just like the Phillies' chances of holding a 4-0 lead in the seventh, we are gone.
There you go.